Here's the second part of the grading rubric for section 2, and this part's probably the most complicated part of this section, and it's fairly hard to explain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into two different videos, and in this video I'm going to walk you up through about this part right here. So how to create the data table given the allocation rates we've just created, and then I'll give you a different video later on how to do the rest of this. So get some of this stuff out of the way. What you're going to want to do here is open up the spreadsheet. You can't see the bottom of it, but this is the spreadsheet I give you in there. The spreadsheet I give you in the second section of the case that gives us these tables with the costs we're going to now allocate, and then it also gives you this activity allocation. So what we did in the first part of this section of the case is we came up with a cost allocation rate for each of these cost drivers, and I just made up some numbers here. These obviously aren't the right numbers, but this would be correspondingly, each order costs $1, each sales visit to a customer is $2, each marketing campaign $3, so on and so forth. So this is our rate, and now the next step would be to allocate these costs, which would be the 3.5 million and the 3.4 million, to each of the customers. Now that we have the rate, we can kind of do that. The last piece of information we're missing to be able to effectively allocate all those costs is how much of each activity does each customer consume. So I've got a listing here under this activity allocation tab of all the customers and all the activity cost drivers and how much activity they consumed for each of the corresponding drivers. So you can see that for Northwest Frame and Art Supply distributors, we logged 7,248 orders for them. So this part of the data table, the first thing I guess you could do, and I think it's easier, is if you go ahead and you convert this thing to a data table. So I go to insert table, hit OK, and I could go up and I want you to label the table. You could come up with some logical explanation for the label. And now from here I want you to now tell me how much dollar amount we allocate to each customer based off of each activity. So I'm going to insert a column here, and I could say order taken costs, something like that. And so I would take the number of orders, and this is going to be a formula. I'm going to multiply that by, and this you're going to refer back to this allocation table you've created, and you can build the formula to refer back to the orders taken cost allocation rate. And I'm going to put a cell reference there. I'm going to lock that so that my formula works all the way down. I hit F4. You couldn't see that obviously, and put a $sign in front of the H and in front of the 3. And there you go. It very quickly allocated now $7,248 for Northwest Frame and Art Supply distributors because of the orders taken costs. Okay, great. So now I've got all those costs accounted for. You're going to repeat that step for each of the remaining overhead costs. And I would suggest to you to build in some kind of a check figure at this point. We could do a sum of each of these columns. Several ways you could come up with that sum. Okay, and so we've allocated $93,507 of the orders taken costs. And so you do that for all of these overhead costs. You come up with this number for each corresponding cost, and you add each one together and you'll get some big number. The goal here is to make sure you've allocated all of those overhead costs. When you add all those columns across, you should come up with the amount of 3.5 million plus 3.4 million, almost $7 million, and then you'll know you've correctly allocated, or at least you've allocated, maybe not correctly, but you've allocated all the costs to each of the customers. So that's the first part of the data table, and I'll end this video right there.